and you talked about it a little bit, but you were using this example, and I have heard this so many times from many of my clients that, and it's a lot of times from the women, and that they feel like the only time their partner touches them is when they want sex. And so the minute, so it is almost like this immediate shutdown because, oh, I know where this is going. I don't want to go there, slam the door. And so what this says to me is that there's not a lot of physical touch, physical interaction that isn't, and again, as I've talked with my husband, it's like, he's always hopeful, right? But but sometimes, that I think that message gets sent, whether it's intended to or not, and I think that can be a real roadblock. Am I wrong about that, or is that a pretty accurate description?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that, as I mentioned, just the intimidation and pressure are such a buzzkill when it comes to sex, right? And I think, and the thing too is that women and men, right, are obviously very different. And even when you're in a same-sex relationship, you're different. But, from a generalized, biological standpoint, men's sexual responses are very linear, and oftentimes they desire sex and it builds to arousal and then it, hits an orgasm and then it plateaus. And women are like, why don't I ever desire sex? Well, it's because their bodies don't alert them of that. They're not like, oh, I'm hungry. It's like they're waiting for that feeling. And so, of course, when their partner comes up to them and, touches them, they're like, oh, this is exactly what this means. And so I'm going to go to shutdown mode because my body is not alerting me that this is something I want. And I think women, again, generally speaking, are from a biological standpoint kind of cyclical. And it starts with willingness. The biggest sex organ in a body is the brain, and women often have so many things going on in their day-to-day minds, multitasking, that they're never asking themselves, like, oh, could I be into it? It's like, no, I don't have time for that. So I think that the part is willingness, and then, after that, it's flipped. It's like women have to be aroused before they desire sex, and that may or may not lead into an orgasm. And so I think that when there's, oftentimes when women are intimidated by physical touch or, that initiation, it's often because they have too much on their plate. There might be a disconnect in one of these layers, and or they're super type A and they have way too much going on that they don't give themselves the room to become aroused to want sex with their partner. So that's where you think the non-sexual intimacy is such a big factor, because if couples can say, let's take sex off the table for a while, let's take sex off the table for 3 weeks or a month or whatever, and just focus on physically cuddling and making out and massaging and showering together, and knowing that pressure, that expectation's off the table, then you might find women actually are like, oh, this feels safer, and I have the free choice now to initiate, or the free choice to be willing to engage with a touch that doesn't feel forceful or scary.
And, and this is such a complication because we are wired so very differently. And, and then it's like, I always call it the cosmic joke. Who thought that men and women living together for a long period of time was a good idea? Somebody's up there laughing. I always talk about, it's like my life being the Truman Show. It's like, okay, let's go to Dory's household and watch what's going on. And, it's like, okay. Because, it seems so very straightforward. And in the beginning, it frequently is. So when things go a little haywire, then I think a lot of people jump to conclusions. Oh, I'm with the wrong partner, or, there's something wrong with me. And I really think that there's a lack of information about just how our bodies work. I mean, the idea, and I know you know about this, the idea that many women, and I don't know what the percentage is, but it's probably at least 50% of women who have responsive desire, which is exactly what you were talking about before. We need to be physically aroused before we actually feel desire. And this comes into play when, why does my wife never initiate? It's like, because she doesn't, the desire hasn't broken through. And I do think that's why, vacation sex is usually so great, because you're out of the ordinary, you're doing something new, you don't have all your routine kind of stuff. And then, and you're spending, hopefully, good quality time together. And so I think that in that case, the desire is much easier to tap into.
Agreed. Yeah, there's more willingness to be open to that desire, right? Or sometimes vacation sex could be more pressuring, right? Like that's what's tricky too. Yeah, but no, I think that's absolutely fair. Right. It's that it's easy to personalize that my wife doesn't find me attractive, or my wife doesn't want sex. What's wrong with her? What's wrong with me? But it's just a misunderstanding of, like you're saying, the human body. And also just, again, this perspective of the layered cake. Like, are you guys focusing on, the foundation? Are you focusing on the emotional connectivity? How much trust do you have in your partner? How much trust do they have in you? I think sometimes, again, like, generally speaking, men can be more sexually vulnerable than women initially, and maybe that's where they find comfort. Whereas women, like, engagement of emotional connectivity and attunement helps them feel more sexual vulnerably in the bedroom. So it's like that chicken or the egg, kind of scenario, and neither one's right or wrong, but how do we both try to meet in the middle by going outside of our comfort zones and being more emotionally vulnerable, and then also being more, sexually vulnerable, and helping each other, bridge these gaps.
Well, and something else we haven't talked about, but it's just also the fluctuation of hormones. A woman's cycle. And at one part in her cycle, she may be very interested, and at other parts she may not be, and so all these kinds of things need to be taken into account, and we don't talk about it, which is why I'm so glad you're here today. So how does this, we've been talking about this, and, so the icing on the cake is actually the sexual intimacy. And, and you were talking earlier when you were talking something, Esther Perel's Mating in Captivity popped into my head about, this maintaining the erotic desire while you're going through the regular day-to-day stuff with your partner. It's like, again, okay, who set up this system? How do couples keep that going? How do we negotiate through this if the icing on the cake isn't happening?
I think that it's about being appreciative of the journey of a relationship, and I think just understanding what your expectations are, because I think a lot of times we expect, and a lot of times we demand, and a lot of times we project, and we don't realize that lulls are actually incredibly healing, and they're actually incredibly helpful in our journeys and anything, right? Our lulls in academia and, physical health, emotional health, sexual, they're teaching us something. And sometimes a lull can be an opportunity to, learn and to, broaden certain aspects of your relationship. So I think it's about maybe reframing, not just asking the question, how do we desire a partner for the rest of our lives? It's how do you deal with the times that you don't, right? That, to me, I think a more important question of not just how do we revive it, but how do we also sustain the moments when we're not attracted to each other? How do we sustain those connections when, we're arguing, or we're disconnected, or we just had a baby and we can't have sex, or there's something going on in our lives where, we have a moment where we have to push that on pause. And the other thing is, it's about prioritization, and owning that, it's our birthright to have pleasure, and it's exciting to evolve that part of yourself. And so, maybe also reframing that as less of a duty and a responsibility to provide your partner, but rather this is an of journey that we're embarking on together. And like that's, a really cool piece. And I think that comes with sex education, that comes with understanding your own body, your own limitations, your own, like maybe limiting beliefs around sex or your body, and constantly, trying to evolve. You can enjoy sex, because when you enjoy it, it's a lot easier to prioritize it.
Right, and there's so many things that can get in the way of that. And one of them, which is somewhat off topic but not really, is this what I call the badge of honor of busyness. And developing this aspect of your relationship takes time, and it takes being intentional, right? I mean, you can do the, it's Tuesday night, you know what that means, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But that can get old. Anything can get old and unattractive, right? And being able to talk about it, which of course is so challenging, because, I'm not sure how much we can get more personal than when we are literally and figuratively naked in front of our partners. And, what we enjoy, what we don't like, how do we talk about this, even going into our own stories about, our beliefs about it, what we've learned about it. I mean, you were talking about, pressure and thinking back to the days where, I mean, it still happens with some couples where, the wedding night takes on this, huge thing, and it's like people are exhausted, and
I didn't have sex on my wedding night.
I mean,
I didn't. No way.
I mean, it's built up to be this big, huge thing, and it's like, okay, yeah, let's set unrealistic expectations for people. So, what is your best suggestion? Because going back to what I was taught for a long time, and it's not exactly accurate, was that if things outside of the bedroom were good, it would solve the problems in the bedroom. And that's, and we're talking a little bit about this, about the layer cake, but what couples do, or what suggestion do you have for couples who feel they actually have the foundational layers, but they're still struggling?
There isn't a one-size-fits-all answer to this equation, and I think if couples, it might be like that they just haven't prioritized that part of their relationship and just don't know how, or, it could also indicate that they might not have that sexual compatibility, and that, is something that they would have to explore and answer for themselves.
So do you think it's possible to increase sexual compatibility?
I do.
Okay.
I absolutely do. I think that it's a little bit trickier. I think if you've started your relationship with not having physical or sexual attraction, and I think you can build off of that. But I think it just depends. There's some people that there's a term called demisexual, for example, that need the desire to have an emotional connection and a depth with someone before they physically are attracted to someone, right? And so it's like, might find that that's the case, and like there might just be some areas of growth that need to be had around emotional intimacy. But again, I think if we look at sex and sexuality as vulnerability, then there's ways to enhance emotional intimacy and vulnerability as well as sexual.
Well, that's good to know. And so I would love to continue talking about this topic, but my producer's going, okay, wrap it up. So can you tell people where they can learn more about you, about this topic?
Sure, yeah. So I do have a practice located in Denver called Modern Love Counseling, but I also have a business that I created with my husband, actually, that is, tailored towards helping, couples bridge this gap. We have curated date boxes that help with emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, sexual, intimacy, as well as like adult products that help spice up, things in the bedroom if you're curious but you don't know how. There's communication prompts and things like that, and that you can find on modernlovebox.com. So Modern Love Counseling and Modern